18-year-old Alex Martinez and his 19-year-old sister Emma walked onto the voice stage together, something extraordinary filled the air. Not because of Alex's slightly different facial features that marked him as having Down syndrome or the way Emma's protective hand never left his shoulder, but because of the pure, radiant joy that seemed to emanate from Alex's entire being as he took in the bright lights, the massive stage, and the magnitude of his dreams coming true. What nobody in that studio knew was that Alex had been practicing for this moment every single day for 2 years, singing into his bedroom mirror while Emma cheered him on, believing with the unwavering faith that only comes from unconditional love that her little brother could achieve anything he set his heart on. Hidden in their story was a bond forged by protection, strengthened by advocacy, and sustained by the kind of sibling love that sees ability where others see disability, potential where others see limitations, and beauty where others see difference. Let me take you back to understand how these extraordinary siblings reached this stage, because their journey proves that some of the most powerful love stories happen between brothers and sisters who refuse to let the world define what's possible. Alex Martinez had been born with Down syndrome into a family that chose to see his diagnosis not as a limitation but as a different way of experiencing the world. From his first day home from the hospital, his older sister Emma had appointed herself as his protector, his advocate, and his biggest believer in a world that didn't always understand his potential. Emma was 3 years old when Alex was born, old enough to understand that her baby brother was special, but young enough to accept that specialness is simply another wonderful thing about him. While other families might have struggled with the diagnosis, the Martinez family had embraced Alex's differences as gifts that made their family unique, stronger, and more loving than they had ever imagined possible. As Alex grew, it became clear that while he faced challenges with cognitive development and speech, he possessed something extraordinary, an intuitive understanding of music that seemed to transcend any intellectual limitations. By age 5, Alex could hear a song once and hum it perfectly. By age 8, he was harmonizing with radio songs in ways that astounded his family. By age 12, he was writing his own simple melodies that carried emotional depth far beyond his years. Emma had always been Alex's interpreter, his bridge to a world that didn't always have patience for his different pace of communication. She learned to understand his unique way of expressing himself, could translate his excited gestures and half-formed words into clear communication that helped others see the brilliant mind working behind his developmental delays. But music was the one area where Alex needed no translation, no interpretation, no assistance. When Alex sang, his voice was clear, purposeful, and filled with an emotional authenticity that moved everyone who heard it. Music became his language, his way of showing the world that intellectual disability didn't diminish the capacity for beauty, creativity, or profound expression. School had been challenging for Alex. Despite being in inclusive programs with supportive teachers, he faced the daily reality of being different in a world that often valued conformity above compassion. Other students weren't always cruel, but they didn't always understand Alex's enthusiasm, his different way of processing social cues, his innocent approach to friendships that sometimes made him vulnerable to misunderstanding. Emma had been his constant defender throughout their school years. She walked with him between classes, sat with him at lunch when others didn't include him, and firmly but kindly corrected anyone who used hurtful language or made assumptions about Alex's capabilities. She had turned down college opportunities that would have taken her far from home, choosing instead to attend a local community college so she could continue being Alex's advocate and supporter. "Emma, you don't have to stay home for me," Alex would tell her in his careful, deliberate way of speaking. "I can be okay by myself." "I know you can, Alex," Emma would always reply. "But I like being your sister. It's my favorite job in the whole world." The idea to audition for The Voice had come from Alex himself. He'd been watching the show religiously, studying every performance, every coach's reaction, every moment of triumph and acceptance. "Emma," he had said one evening after a particularly moving episode, "I want to sing there. I want to show people that different people can make beautiful music too." Emma's heart had soared and broken simultaneously. She knew her brother's talent, knew the purity of his voice, and the authenticity of his performances. But she also knew the world could be cruel to people like Alex, knew that national television might not be ready for someone who looked different, spoke differently, processed emotions differently than typical contestants. But Alex was determined with the kind of stubborn persistence that had carried him through 16 years of proving people wrong about what he could accomplish. "Emma, will you sing with me? We sound good together. We can show them that families help each other make beautiful things." The audition process had been complicated by Alex's needs. The Voice Kids producers had worked with disability advocacy groups to ensure that Alex could participate fully, with accommodations for his processing differences and communication style. When they heard Alex and Emma's audition video, a beautiful rendition of "You've Got a Friend" that showcased both Alex's pure voice and Emma's supportive harmonies, they knew they had discovered something special. Standing on the voice stage now, Alex felt overwhelmed by sensory input in ways that his Down syndrome made difficult to process. The lights were brighter than anything he'd experienced, the audience larger than he'd imagined, the weight of the moment more intense than his emotional regulation skills could easily handle. But Emma was there, her steady presence providing the anchor he needed to stay grounded. Blake Shelton, Kelly Clarkson, John Legend, and Niall Horan sat in their red chairs, their backs turned, unaware that they were about to meet siblings who would redefine their understanding of talent, family, and the many forms that beauty could take. "Whenever you're ready," Blake called out encouragingly, his voice carrying that familiar warmth that somehow reminded Alex of home, of safety, of people who accepted him exactly as he was. Alex stepped forward toward the microphone, but the overwhelming nature of the moment began to hit him all at once. His excitement, which had been building for weeks, suddenly transformed into anxiety as the reality of performing for strangers, being judged, being seen by millions of people, crashed over him like a wave. He began to stim, his hands flapping in the repetitive motions that helped him self-regulate when emotions became too big to handle. His breathing became rapid and shallow, and tears started flowing down his cheeks. "I'm different," Alex said into the microphone, his voice shaking with emotion and the speech patterns characteristic of Down syndrome. "People sometimes think different means not good. But I love music. I love singing. I just want to show people that different people can make beautiful things too." The studio fell into moved silence as everyone processed what they were hearing. Not just Alex's words, but the courage it took for someone with intellectual disabilities to stand on national television and advocate for himself, to ask for acceptance while being vulnerable about his differences. Emma immediately stepped closer to Alex, her protective instincts kicking in as she saw her brother struggling with the overwhelming emotions of the moment. "Alex is the most amazing person I know," Emma said, her voice strong but emotional. "He has Down syndrome, but that doesn't make him less than anyone else. It makes him special in the most beautiful way. He feels music differently than other people, deeper, purer, more honestly than anyone I've ever met." Emma's voice began to break as she continued. "He's my little brother, but he's also my hero. He's taught me that being different isn't something to hide or fix. It's something to celebrate." Alex looked at his sister, seeing the tears in her eyes, and something shifted in his emotional state. The overwhelming anxiety began to transform back into the excitement and determination that had brought him to this stage. "Emma is my best friend," Alex said, his voice becoming clearer as he felt supported and understood. "She always believes in me, even when other people don't. She taught me that being different is okay, and that music makes everyone the same inside." Blake Shelton felt something he'd never experienced in all his years of coaching. This wasn't just about talent or performance anymore. This was about human dignity, about family love, about the courage it takes to be vulnerable in pursuit of your dreams, when the world doesn't always make space for people who are different. Without hesitation, Blake was out of his chair and walking onto the stage, his cowboy boots clicking against the polished floor, as he approached these siblings who represented everything beautiful about unconditional love and unwavering support. "Alex, Blake said softly as he reached them, getting down to Alex's eye level in the respectful way that showed he understood how to communicate with someone who had different needs. Emma, I want you both to know something. Different isn't just okay. Different is beautiful. Different is what makes music interesting, what makes the world better, what makes people like me realize we still have so much to learn. Alex's stimming began to slow as he focused on Blake's kind eyes and gentle voice. You really think different can be beautiful? Alex, I know different is beautiful, Blake replied firmly. You know why? Because the best music I've ever heard has come from people who see the world differently than everyone else, who feel things more deeply, who aren't afraid to be exactly who they are. But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming. Blake turned to address the other coaches, his voice carrying across the studio with the authority of someone who understood that some moments transcend entertainment. Kelly, John, Niall, I need you to turn your chairs around. Alex and Emma aren't just here to audition. They're here to teach us something about love, about acceptance, about the kind of courage it takes to chase your dreams when the world tells you those dreams aren't meant for people like you. One by one, the coaches turned their chairs to face the siblings. Kelly Clarkson was already crying, understanding as someone who had always championed underdogs and authentic voices. John Legend looked moved beyond words by the raw honesty of their presentation. Niall sat forward with the kind of respectful attention that showed he recognized something extraordinary happening. Blake gently placed one hand on Alex's shoulder and the other on Emma's, creating a protective circle around these siblings who had already shown more courage than most people demonstrate in a lifetime. Now, Blake said softly, Alex, Emma, I want you to sing the way you do at home, the way you do when it's just family, when love is the only audience that matters. Show us what beautiful sounds like when it comes from the heart. Alex looked at Emma, who nodded encouragingly, and together they began to sing Count on Me by Bruno Mars. What happened next was nothing short of miraculous. Alex's voice, when it emerged, was pure, clear, and filled with an emotional honesty that seemed to reach into every corner of the studio. Yes, some words were shaped differently by his Down syndrome, but the emotion, the love, the sheer joy in making music transcended any speech differences. Emma's voice blended perfectly with his, not overpowering or correcting, but supporting and harmonizing in the way that only comes from years of singing together, protecting each other, believing in each other. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3. I'll be there. As they sang, Alex reached for Emma's hand, and the connection between them became visible to everyone watching. This wasn't just a duet. It was a conversation between siblings who had spent their lives proving that love creates its own perfect harmony, that different voices can blend into something more beautiful than either could create alone. When they reached the chorus, Alex's confidence grew, his voice soaring with the kind of freedom that comes when you know you're accepted exactly as you are. Emma smiled through her tears as she watched her brother shine in the way she'd always known he could, given the right audience, the right support, the right amount of love. The studio was completely silent, except for their voices, creating a moment of pure connection between performers and audience that transcended any competition, any judgment, any preconceived notions about what talent should look like. When they finished, the silence lasted longer than usual, not from confusion or uncertainty, but from the recognition that everyone present had just witnessed something sacred, the power of unconditional love, the beauty of accepting differences, the magic that happens when families support each other's dreams. All four coaches hit their buttons simultaneously, their chairs spinning to face siblings who had just demonstrated that the most powerful performances come not from perfection, but from authenticity, courage, and love. Blake was already walking back toward Alex and Emma before the other chairs had finished turning. When he reached them, he did something unprecedented. He hugged them both at the same time, creating a moment of connection that showed Alex and Emma they were not just accepted, but celebrated. Alex, Emma, Blake said, his voice thick with emotion he wasn't trying to hide. That was one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard in my life. Alex, your voice is incredible, but more than that, your courage is inspiring. Emma, your love for your brother is the most beautiful harmony I've ever heard. Kelly Clarkson, herself, moved beyond words, added through her tears, Alex honey, you just proved that the most powerful voices are the ones that come from the heart. You sang with such honesty, such joy, such pure love, that you made everyone in this room better just by listening to you. John Legend said, what you two just shared was more than music. It was a masterclass in what family means, what support looks like, what happens when people believe in each other unconditionally. Niall, clearly emotional, addressed Alex directly. Alex mate, you've got something that can't be taught. You've got soul, you've got heart, and you've got a voice that makes people feel things. That's what real music is about. Alex and Emma chose Team Blake, not because of strategy or competition, but because they recognized in him someone who understood that the best coaches don't try to change people, they help people become the most authentic versions of themselves. Over the following weeks, Blake became more than their coach. He became their advocate, working with the voice production team to ensure Alex had all the support he needed while never treating his Down syndrome as something that needed to be hidden or minimized. Blake learned about Alex's needs, his communication style, his amazing abilities alongside his challenges. Working with Alex and Emma changed everything for me, Blake said in an interview during the live shows. Alex taught me that talent isn't about being perfect, it's about being real, being brave, being willing to share your heart with the world. Emma taught me what real love looks like, the kind that believes in someone so completely that it helps them believe in themselves. Alex and Emma's journey through the competition became a celebration of inclusion, family bonds, and the power of music to unite people across all differences. Their version of Bridge Over Troubled Water brought the studio to its feet. Their duet with Blake on Lean On Me became an anthem about supporting each other through any challenge. During the finale, Alex and Emma performed an original song that Blake had helped them write, called Different and Beautiful. As Alex sang about being proud of who he was, about having a sister who always believed in him, about wanting the world to see that different people could create beautiful things, there wasn't a dry eye in the studio. Alex and Emma finished third in the competition, but their real victory was already won. They had shown millions of viewers that Down syndrome doesn't diminish talent, that family love can overcome any obstacle, and that some of the most beautiful music comes from the most authentic hearts. In their final performance speech, delivered with Alex holding the microphone while Emma stood proudly beside him, they shared a message that resonated far beyond the competition. We want every person who feels different to know that different is not less than, different is special. And we want every family to remember that when you believe in someone, you help them believe in themselves. Blake stood behind them throughout their speech, tears streaming down his face as these siblings taught the world a lesson about acceptance, love, and the infinite ways that humans can create beauty together. Today, Alex continues to pursue music with Emma's unwavering support. They perform at disability advocacy events, inclusion workshops, and community gatherings, using their platform to show the world that people with intellectual disabilities have gifts to share, dreams to chase, and voices that deserve to be heard. The microphone Alex used on the voice stage is now displayed at the National Down Syndrome Society headquarters, as a symbol of how barriers can be broken when families refuse to accept limitations and choose to celebrate possibilities instead. Blake Shelton learned something that night that changed his understanding of music forever. Alex and Emma taught me that the most beautiful harmonies aren't just musical, they're human. They happen when people love each other so completely that they help each other shine, when families choose to see ability instead of disability, when we all learn to celebrate what makes each person special. Because sometimes the most powerful voices belong to people who see the world differently. Sometimes the most beautiful music comes from hearts that feel everything more deeply. And sometimes a teenager with Down syndrome and his protective sister can teach everyone that different really is beautiful, that love really can overcome any challenge, and that the most important performances happen when people have the courage to be authentically beautiful, perfectly themselves. Alex and Emma Martinez proved that The Voice isn't about conforming to expectations. It's about showing the world that talent comes in infinite forms, that family love can move mountains, and that when we choose acceptance over judgment, inclusion over exclusion, celebration over limitation, we all become more beautiful, more human, more connected to what really matters.